It's immersive installation that's sculpture, that's environmental, but it's about sort of uncovering and unveiling a certain perspective. Is about a very expansive understanding of the world that we live in today and like the level of individual agency that anyone has in relationship to sort of broader systems that govern and mediate our behavior. All of the work is new commissions, and yeah, he developed this over time, but specifically with the ICA site in mind and our location on the Mall in relationship to the Admiralty Citadel, Buckingham Palace, and St. James Park, so it feels very specific to this place in a thoughtful way. You've got this beautiful seating, which in some ways recalls like very executive, heavy, like corporate, like war room style, but it's also sunken living room, like that very ubiquitous 70s, 80s like conversation pit. But it also has like cinema seating. Cinema is also a thread that runs throughout. It's comfortable, but like you have to scooch way back, and when that happens to your legs is they kind of shoot up and like you look like a little doll and lose all of your authority despite the fact that it feels like you're in a really authoritative position. You also are in direct view of what Gray calls an embrasure, also kind of a bunker, military bunker from which you would shoot out from a position of safety. But in this instance, it's a spy hole, it's a peephole. One thing that I've really enjoyed about working on this exhibition is that Gray as a person, this is true of Gray as a person, but also of the work, that he's incredibly generous. And it feels really open and welcoming and generous, both to multiple interpretations and different perspectives, but also in the ways that it's accessible. Of course, we're also underneath the scoreboard. The countdown takes up this idea of the forthcoming apocalypse, of some imminent kind of disaster, whether or not that's environmental or atomic. It counts down to 0, goes back to 99, and starts again. It's just sort of a constant state of anxiety. The home and the visitor for Gray was an important component to have, thinking about the relationship between public and private, self and other. This is the one thing where everyone's like, well, what does that mean? What's the numbers? What exactly does that correspond to? And I like that there really isn't an answer to that. The suns along the concourse here are stills from Fassbinder's Querelle, but it also feels like multiple suns, multiple worlds, sci-fi world building. Cartoon violence is a theme. Some of you may recognize these concentric circles as the Looney Tunes end credits, but they're also targets. They're hanging in space as objects, which makes them read even more as targets, maybe targets from a shooting range. Coming from an American context here in the UK, of course, like gun violence and repetitive violence is something that's been seeded into culture for so long that at a certain point you become inured to it. And I think Gray is doing something valuable in taking this theme of worlds and within worlds, of like making plain the structures behind our society, trying to unpack that a little bit and reveal them through the analogy of worlds within worlds. I think that the whitewashing works really simply in that way too. That's like obviously a fallacy that some kind of whitewashing would protect anyone at all. But if that's the narrative you've been given and that's the only hope you have, then you are inclined to believe it. I think that's remarkable, in part because the content of the work is pretty grim in many cases. He's addressing the waning of empire, this like late stage capitalism dystopia that we live in. These are structures that we don't have to take for granted. These are things that have been built and manufactured that we can recognize as one version of reality that may or may not be the one that we want and consider constructing another one. So that's what I think is more poignant about the work that otherwise feels like quite playful and fun and lighthearted, but there is something like much deeper and difficult to address. But it does this in this way that makes you feel like quite at home. I would really encourage all visitors to just come and be in the space, sit on the couch, go in the bunker, sit on the windowsills, spend time just experiencing the space and see how it makes you feel, both like in your own body, in your own context, but then in relationship to other people who share the space. Go into the bunker and look through the peephole and think about how that makes you feel as someone who's spying on other people, and think about what it means to be the person who's surveilled. Most of the work is meant to be kind of generative and about inducing conversation and exchanges amongst people, and so the public program really feels like an outlet of the actual show in a really beautiful way, and Gray was really involved in crafting and shaping it. So I would really encourage people to do that because it's just another way of experiencing the show and thinking about where it leads. Yeah.